Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So before we start, I do want to let you guys know that today is Tombox's birthday, so happy birthday to him. You guys can comment happy birthday down in the comments of this video and he will see it all for sure. Now for today, I do want to go over a few cards that we've seen starting to trend here recently because of some recent support that was just announced over in the OCG. I think we've actually gotten a ton of different things revealed between new cards coming in Alliance Insight, the Tactical Tridex, and then a few other odd products here and there. So plenty of stuff that you guys should definitely be aware of. Let's get started. Alright, so kicking things off, I actually want to take a look at a card that is trending downwards. It is Xrisal. It's actually a series of cards here because I think that price-wise, we can kind of look at Sword, Ice, and X as all being the same thing. They are ultras that are generally viewed as 3-ofs in the Ryziel decks. Ryziel were arguably the best archetype to come out of crossover breakers, and the 3 main deck ultras were among some of the best cards that you could pull. For the most part, it looked like they were going to be settling at around $30 per copy. However, we've seen all of the Ryziels starting to go down in price, approaching the $20 mark per copy, and I think there are a few reasons as to why. The first is the emergence of some Ryziel variants that are cutting the Ryziel engine down to 2 Sword and 2 X. That's one less copy of each that some players are going to actually need. The second thing is that Malice has come out as a much stronger deck than a lot of players were expecting, and on top of that, it's a really popular choice for a lot of players because it's a waifu deck. This has caused Malice in Underground and Malice White Rabbit to be more expensive than expected, taking away some of that value from the Ryziel Ultras. And the final thing is that we just saw the ban list over in the OCG, and Xrisal was actually limited to 1 over there, so even though we did just have a ban list here in the TCG, right, we should get another one in 3 to 4 months time, and I think that given how strong of a showing Ryziel had at YCS Anaheim, we would expect to see some sort of hits to the Ryziel cards. Now, I don't know if that's going to be X hit, or it's going to be Bonfire hit, or something, but we should expect to see the deck at least tapped in some way. Now, all of that said, the gist of it is that the Ryziel cards are a bit cheaper than I think a lot of players are expecting, and I think they could continue to trend down slightly. You may want to keep an eye on the prices of these cards, as players will be cracking packs throughout the holidays, and we'll likely see a lot of the Ultra main deck Ryziel monsters move down to around $18 to $20 within the next couple of weeks. Up next, let's talk about Live Twin Kiss-A-Kill. So we just had Live Twin support revealed over in the OCG, coming in the Tactical Tridex, which are sort of like more competitive structure decks that the OCG releases. In there, we actually got some really good support for the Live Twin strategy. They have a new main deck monster that is a hand trap that negates your opponent's card if they respond to a Live Twin card or effect, and it's also a monster that can special summon itself out of the graveyard. They also have a new Link 1, where you can activate its effect and then draw a card every time your opponent responds to your Kiss-A-Kill or Lila monster's effect. So yeah, I do think that if any other deck got support like this, it would probably make them tier 1, tier 0.5, but Live Twins are a bit of a more fragile strategy and do need a lot of help. However, the thing to remember is that the Kiss-A-Kill half of the Live Twins are Light Fiend monsters, so they naturally synergize really well with the Fiendsmith engine. Anyways, a bunch of the Live Twin cards have been reprinted, but there's a few odd cards that haven't seen a reprint as of yet, despite coming out a few years ago in Genesis Impact. Here we've seen Live Twin Kiss-A-Kill jumping up in price. This is one of the original base form ones with a really simple effect to special summon a Lila from your hand or deck. It's one of the best starters, but I think it's very easy to overlook because it was just a super rare in its original set. However, this is the only time that the card has ever been printed, so we're seeing it trending upwards. The collector's rares have gone from $30 or $35 up to just under $50 each, and then we also have the super rares worth noting at around $5 to $6 per copy as well. I would expect some of the Live Twin cards to be reprinted once the cards are eventually imported here to the TCG, since other cards such as Lila and then the main deck Evil Twins monster still haven't been reprinted here either. So if you don't plan on playing the deck down the road, or if you open some Genesis Impact and you're still sitting on that bulk, this is definitely a card that you should try to dig up and offload. I do want to take a second to remind all of you to check out our website, MSTmerch.com. Now, over at MSTmerch.com, we have everything that you will need to optimize your Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament experience. We have the basics with white, black, pink, and our new purple matted sleeves, which are my personal favorites, as well as smooth and matted sleeves to double sleeve your valuable cards and sleeves with for tournament play. But we also have some other items that you can really use to customize your collection. We have amazing foil sleeves, including some with the MST.TV logo, and dividers and subdividers so that you can keep your collection perfectly organized and easily accessible. Regardless of if you're a competitive or casual player, I'm certain that you'll find something that you will enjoy over at MSTmerch.com. On to the next one, we have Eldritch the Golden Lord. So Eldritch, I think, is a strategy that a lot of players really don't like. I think it's something that people try to just play like a pure floodgate deck with, where they use 3 Eldritch, the traps, and then a whole bunch of floodgates. The strategy was actually pretty good in terms of competitive viability. It was just a really simple strategy and not really that fun to play against, and it got phased out of the meta rather quickly. Now, Eldritch is getting a couple of new cards coming in Alliance Insight. There's a new fusion monster and a new trap monster. They both seem okay, but I don't think either of them is really good enough to make me think that the strategy is going to be meta relevant again. We will just have to wait and see, but I think that the deck might be too vulnerable with cards like the Bestials running around. We have Feather Duster and Lightning Storm in the game, as well as Rivalry of Warlords and Goes in Match each being hit to 1. Now, fortunately, Eldritch was actually reprinted in Rarity Collection 1, but this time it came at a time where Eldritch really wasn't that popular at all, and it wasn't really competitively viable, so the card ended up being dirt cheap. The card actually had each of its different artworks get all of the different rarities. I personally really like the alternate art, but I do understand that the original does feel really classic. Now, prior to the announcement of the support, we saw either QCR printing of Eldritch sitting at around $6 to $7. Now, however, we've seen both printings shoot up to right around the $18 mark. I think the original printing is actually just $1 or so more than the alternate art, but either way, the price has roughly tripled with the announcement of the new support. Personally, I'm not moved by the cards. I don't think the deck's going to do anything. I think it's more just appealing to players who look back and remember the strategy fondly. This is probably another card that you should try to move while it is seeing some hype, as it will likely settle back down over the next couple of weeks. Okay, so this one I kind of forgot about. It's Aaron the Ogdoadic King. So in Konami's latest video promoting the upcoming core set Supreme Darkness, they revealed to us the new TCG exclusive archetype known as the Mitsurugi. They're a ritual-based theme, and let's just say I really hope that the second wave of support is good. However, players are naturally looking for ways to abuse the cards, and one thing that players have turned to is the Ogdoadic. The Ogdoadic are a failed archetype that came out back in Ancient Guardians. I think they're one of the worst themes that we've ever gotten from one of those deck building sets, and actually Ancient Guardians is probably one of the worst sets that's ever been printed. Now, even though the Ogdoadic stuff is probably okay or decent with the Mitsurugi, it's definitely not enough to make it a top tier or meta relevant threat. I think that the whole archetype is just going to ultimately flop. However, we've seen the price of several cards go up, with Aaron being one of the big ones. It lets you summon it out of the graveyard by tributing 2 monsters, it can rip a card from your opponent's hand if they add a card to their hand, and it is also able to add a reptile from your deck or graveyard to your hand if a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily that Aaron will fit well with the Mitsurugi specifically, but rather Aaron is the best card from its archetype. So if you mix the Ogdoadic and the Mitsurugi archetypes together, you should probably just use this card because it's so good. Because of this, we've seen the collector's rare version of Aaron go from $6 all the way up to $30 to $35, while the ultras have gone from around $2 up to $12 to $15. This is definitely some hype that's not going to result in any sort of meta relevance, so it's another card I would definitely look to offload as soon as possible. Up next, we have Heraldic Beast Leo. Another one of the archetypes getting support in Alliance Insight is the Heraldic Beast. If you haven't heard of them, I don't really blame you. I think they were a really forgettable archetype that didn't do anything at all during the Xyz era. They're an Xyz-based theme that tried to summon monsters back out of the graveyard in order to make plays. There was just always decks that were better at it than Heraldic Beast. Now, they do have a couple of new cards coming, and while I don't think that the cards are anything really spectacular, I think they could potentially be an interesting tier 2 or rogue strategy. Leo is a card from the theme that was actually used back then if you did play the deck. If this card was sent to the graveyard, you simply search for any Heraldic Beast monster from your deck. I believe that this card is run at 2 in new Heraldic Beast decks. You always want to have one available to dump to the graveyard so that you can search, but if you can revive it and then attach it as an Xyz material, detach it during your opponent's turn and send it to the graveyard, you can potentially search for some follow-up as well. Now, because of how irrelevant the theme was, most of the Heraldic Beast cards were only ever printed as commons or rares, so they are actually mostly pretty cheap and easy to find. Leo is a rare that only has one printing from back in Cosmo Blazer. It never got a tin reprint or anything, but you do need 2 copies of it if you want to play the deck. The deck doesn't seem to be getting too much hype as the next big thing, but it still has potential, especially since you can play Heraldic Beasts alongside Xrisal, as they are both rank 4 base strategies, and so we are seeing Leo up at around $5 per copy. Probably something you can look to dump while it is seeing some hype. I would expect this or Advanced Heraldry Art, or both, to be reprinted as OTS Tournament Pack Super Rares closer to when Alliance Insight drops. So here's one that's a little bit more forward looking. We have Crimson Dragon. So this card is a generic level 12 synchro that is used to cheat other big synchro monsters out of the extra deck. This was primarily used by Centurion to bring out King Calamity and stop your opponent from playing the game. I believe they now use it to bring out Cosmic Blazar Dragon. Looking forward, however, this is something that's used by Blue Eyes decks. There you're able to cheat out other big boss monsters like Stardust Cypher Divine Dragon. I do know that there are some builds in the OCG choosing to cut the Crimson Dragon package altogether, since it's kind of difficult to make if your opponent has a lot of hand traps or other disruption, but I'm fairly certain that the card is going to see a ton of play here in the TCG once the Blue Eyes structure deck comes out. That said, Crimson Dragon was just reprinted in the 2024 tins, and that actually made it pretty cheap, coming in at around $5 to $6. However, we have to remember that because of Quarter Century Bonanza, not as many of the tins were opened as we'd expect to see in years prior. Now, as we get closer to the release of the Blue Eyes structure deck, we're starting to see all the versions of Crimson Dragon starting to go up. Technically, the secret rares are the lowest rarity. Both versions have trended upwards and are now at around $12 to $15, with fairly few quantities available on TCG Player. If you guys are interested in playing with the Blue Eyes stuff when it comes out in February of next year, this is probably a card you will want to grab sooner rather than later, as I'm expecting the massive demand for the deck to drive this card's price up to around the $20 to $25 range. And finally, the last card we're looking at for today is number 11 Big Eye. This card is a generic rank 7 Xyz monster that a lot of you will probably know if you played back in Dragon Ruler format. It's a really simple card. You detach a material from it to take control of an opponent's monster. So with the Dragon Rulers getting more support in Alliance Insight, it seems that some players are speculating that Big Eye will see play once again, so players are looking to pick them up. To be fair, taking control of an opponent's monster is pretty good, and on top of that, remember that Big Eye's effect is a soft once per turn. So if you can make multiple Big Eyes, you can take multiple monsters. On top of that, Big Eye has 2600 attack points and is a dark attribute monster, so it can be used to tribute for Eradicator Epidemic Virus or Deck Devastation Virus, which could be good depending on how the format shapes up. For high-end printings, we really just have the Ultimate Rare, which has gone from being $70 to $75 to now being $130 per copy. The original has stayed pretty steady. The Secret Rare version currently sits at around $15. Aside from that, the card has a bunch of older printings. It was a Gold Rare, it was in the 2014 Advent Calendar back in Germany, and it was in the first Battles of Legend set. Depending on which version you want, a single Big Eye is going to cost you anywhere from $5 to $10 each. Overall, not a bad card to pick up if you just want to play Dragon Rulers down the road and you want to own the card for now. Do just keep in mind that this card could very easily fit into the nostalgia pool in Quarter Century Stampede, so be wary of holding onto too many extra copies. Alright guys, that is all we have for this episode. I guess this episode's going to be going up on Christmas Eve, so if you are watching this before then, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all the best to all of you guys. We will be still putting out some videos over the course of the next week, so we still have a little bit more to go before we hit 2025. I think Tom and I are going to try to record some stuff as well, some kind of like year-end material, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.